I stood on the porch of my old house, the Thanksgiving pie still warm in my trembling hands, as my ex-husband smiled through the doorway. The table was full, the candles flickered, but my son's chair sat empty. He left, Gary said, too easily, like it was nothing. But when I found the deed to my home waiting on his desk, with Gary's name printed neatly beneath mine, I knew my son hadn't just vanished. I'd come home for answers, and I was leaving with revenge written in ink. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The wind had that sharp, leaf-damp smell of late November when Valerie Monroe pulled into the cul-de-sac. Her old Toyota's wipers scraped across the windshield once, clearing the mist. The porch light on her former home glowed faintly. Same yellow bulb, same chipped railing, same ache in her chest every time she saw it. She balanced the cranberry pie on one arm and her overnight bag on the other, the weight of both oddly symbolic. Sweetness and baggage. She paused at the front door. Her own handwriting was still on the welcome mat, stitched back when she lived here full-time. You're welcome, but not for long, she thought, breathing through the nerves that came from seeing your ex-husband's house listed under his name now. Gary Hunt opened the door before she could knock. He looked every bit the smug retiree, pressed flannel, a belly that had turned from solid to soft, and that self-satisfied grin that hadn't aged a day. Val, he said, as though they'd seen each other just yesterday. You made it early. Traffic was light, she replied flatly, brushing past him. The house smelled of butter and thyme and faint cigarette smoke, Miriam's habit no matter how she pretended otherwise. Valerie set the pie on the counter. Where should I put this? In the center, Miriam called from the dining room. Her voice could cut through drywall. She emerged a second later in a cream sweater dress, lips pressed into a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Nice to see you, Valerie. You've outdone yourself again. Cranberry, right? Same as always. Valerie smoothed a wrinkle in the pie crust. Where's Blake? He promised he'd be here early to help with the setup. A silence hung. Miriam exchanged a look with Gary, one of those married glances that contained an entire conversation. Then she gave a little shrug, gesturing toward the long oak table already dressed in silverware and linen napkins. No Blake this year. Valerie's hand froze mid-motion. Excuse me? Gary leaned against the doorway, arms crossed casually. He left. Needed some space, he said. Valerie blinked. Her heartbeat kicked once, then twice. Left? When? Couple weeks ago. Maybe 3, Gary said, reaching for a glass of wine on the counter. He's been restless. Wanted to figure himself out or whatever. The kids say these days. Without telling me? Valerie's voice had that tremor she hated, too vulnerable, too obvious. Miriam smirked faintly. He's 28, Valerie. He doesn't need permission to breathe. Maybe he just needed a break from... She caught herself, then changed tack. From everything. Valerie turned away, busying herself with the pie knife. Anything to stay composed. He usually calls, she murmured. He always calls. Gary exhaled like a man tired of babysitting feelings. Look, don't make this a whole thing. He's fine. He texted us before he left. Said not to worry. Her pulse tightened. Show me the text. Gary hesitated a half beat too long. Phone's dead, but trust me, he's okay. Valerie dug into her purse, fingers closing around her phone. I'll call him myself. She pressed Blake's contact photo, a grinning shot from last summer when they'd repainted the porch, and lifted the phone to her ear. The dial tone rang once, twice. Voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Gary poured himself another drink. See? He's off somewhere, doing his thing. Probably doesn't want to talk right now. Valerie ignored him and texted instead. Where are you? I'm home. Call me, please. The message went through. The dots never appeared. From the living room, the muffled laughter of football commentary filled the silence. The turkey timer dinged. Miriam started rearranging the napkins as if nothing strange had happened. Valerie stood at the end of the table, staring at the single empty chair next to hers, the one Blake always took. The one he carved his initials into when he was 12. Someone had scrubbed them off, or painted over them. The wood was clean now, sterile. Gary said lightly, "No reason to ruin the holiday, Val. Sit down, have a drink. Let's enjoy dinner." Valerie turned slowly, her eyes sharp. "I'm not eating until I hear my son's voice." The room went still. Even Miriam paused mid-fold. Valerie slipped her coat back on, the pie left untouched on the counter. "If he's not answering, I'll find out why." She stepped out into the cold dusk, her breath visible in short, determined bursts. Behind her, the house glowed warm and false, a picture-perfect Thanksgiving for everyone but her. The wind caught the screen door as it closed, slamming it with a hollow thud, a sound that echoed like a warning. Valerie checked her phone one last time. Still no reply. Her whispered words fogged the air. "You'd better be okay, Blake." And somewhere between the porch light and the edge of the cul-de-sac, a flicker of motion caught her eye. Someone watching from across the street, too still to be casual. She blinked, focused. The figure stepped back into shadow. The shadow across the street was gone by the time Valerie blinked the cold out of her eyes. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. She stayed still a moment longer, phone tight in her hand, listening to the distant hum of televisions and the rustle of wind through dead leaves. When nothing else moved, she crossed her arms, swallowing the chill. Inside the house, muffled voices rose. Gary's low rumble, Miriam's brittle laugh. She stepped back to the door, not knocking this time. She walked straight in. Gary was leaning on the counter, refilling his glass. Miriam had her hands on her hips, pretending not to be watching the window. Valerie's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Tell me again, where's Blake?" Gary looked up, face drawn into that patient smirk he used when he wanted her to feel foolish. "Val, we just talked about this." "Then humor me." He sighed, setting down his glass with an exaggerated clink. "He left. He's not missing, not hiding, just gone. You know how he gets when he's overwhelmed." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Miriam crossed the kitchen in slow, measured steps. "Honestly, Valerie, you're acting like a detective in your own family. He's an adult, for God's sake. Maybe he wanted to avoid another Thanksgiving argument." She smiled thinly. "Can't blame him for that." Valerie turned her gaze on Miriam. "What argument?" "Oh, I don't know," Miriam said lightly. "You two always find something. Bills, choices, the past." She turned back to the oven, adjusting a timer that didn't need adjusting. "Maybe he finally decided to have a life that didn't revolve around your concerns." The words hit harder than they should have. Valerie forced her breath to stay even. "He doesn't vanish. Not without a word." Gary let out a dismissive chuckle. "You always did dramatize things." She stared at him for a long, quiet second, then set her purse on the table. "I'm going to his place." Gary looked up sharply. "There's no point. He's probably halfway to Chicago by now." "Then it won't hurt to check." She didn't wait for their approval. The screen door slammed again as she stepped into the yard, her boots crunching the thin crust of frost over the grass. The backyard stretched behind the house, dimly lit by a single floodlight. At the far end, past the old tool shed, stood the converted studio apartment Gary had built for Blake after college, a separate door, a small porch light, and a row of windows now black and empty. Valerie's breath fogged as she approached. The key she still carried felt cold in her hand. She slid it into the lock and turned. Nothing. It had been changed. Her pulse quickened. She knocked softly, then harder. "Blake?" Her voice came out smaller than she liked. Only the wind answered. She crouched, peering through the small window beside the door. The blinds were drawn, but a gap near the corner showed darkness inside. No light, no movement. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and worried. Around her, the yard felt too quiet. She stepped off the porch, went to the side window, tried again. Locked. She checked the mailbox beside the door, overflowing with circulars and utility notices. 3 weeks' worth, at least. Valerie took out her phone. The screen glowed against her face as she typed, "Where are you, honey? I'm worried. Please text me back." She hit send, waited. The silence pressed against her like a weight. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The wind carried the faint scent of chimney smoke and the far-off laughter of another family's dinner. It all felt wrong, detached from her world entirely. She turned to go, then noticed something glinting in the patch of light under the studio's porch step. She knelt, brushed away a layer of frost, and found a keychain. Blake's. The one she'd given him last Christmas, shaped like a tiny silver guitar. Her throat tightened. No. She closed her fingers around it, the metal biting into her palm. Behind her, a door creaked. Valerie spun around, heart hammering. But it wasn't Blake. It was Gary, standing on the main house porch, arms folded, his silhouette framed by the warm light inside. "Val," he called, voice carrying easily through the cold. "You can't just barge into people's spaces. Come inside before you catch cold." She straightened slowly, holding the keychain out toward him. "Then tell me why his keys are still here." Gary didn't answer right away. Even from the distance, she saw a flicker of annoyance. Or was it fear? Before his expression hardened again. "Because he forgot them," he said flatly. "Now drop this, Valerie. You're making a scene." Her phone buzzed faintly in her pocket, and she froze. She pulled it out, breath catching. One new message. She opened it. Delivery failed. Message not sent. The screen went blank. Valerie looked up again, but Gary was gone from the porch. Only the porch light remained, humming faintly in the dark. She slipped the keychain into her coat pocket and whispered to the empty yard, "You didn't leave on your own, did you?" The wind rustled the trees behind her like a quiet, uneasy answer. The cold clung to Valerie's skin as she re-entered the house. The warmth hit her like a wall. Roasted turkey, candle wax, and the faint musk of old carpet. But none of it felt inviting. Gary and Miriam were nowhere in sight. From the faint echo of running water upstairs, she guessed they were cleaning up or hiding. She moved quietly, each step calculated, her hand still clenched around Blake's keychain in her coat pocket. The metal edge pressed into her palm, grounding her. The staircase creaked as she started up. Halfway to the landing, she paused, listening. A faint hum. Maybe a faucet, maybe Miriam's hairdryer. Nothing more. Valerie continued up. Blake's old bedroom door was closed. It hadn't been for years. She hesitated before turning the knob, expecting the stale scent of a room long abandoned. But when the door swung open, the air hit her like a wave of him. Cedar cologne, detergent, pencil shavings. The room wasn't cleared out. It was paused. The bed was still unmade, a hoodie thrown over the chair. The string lights along the wall were unplugged but still pinned in place. A mug on the nightstand had a thin layer of dust, the coffee inside turned to syrup. Valerie exhaled slowly, her chest tight. "You didn't pack a thing," she whispered. She moved to the desk, fingertips tracing the worn surface. A stack of sketches lay beside a closed laptop, the edges curled from overuse. She opened the drawer. Inside, pens, receipts, a pack of gum, and beneath them, a small leather journal with a cracked spine. She sat on the edge of the bed and flipped it open. Blake's handwriting. tight, deliberate. They keep asking about the house, about the deed. Said it'd be easier if it was in my name than theirs. I told them I'd think about it. I shouldn't have. Valerie's heart stumbled. She read the next line. Mom won't understand until it's too late. She froze, breath shallow. The words looked rushed, almost panicked, the pen strokes darker, more erratic toward the bottom. Something thudded lightly downstairs, a cupboard closing. Valerie looked to the door. Silence again. She slipped the journal into her coat pocket, fingers trembling. Under the bed, a shape caught her eye. Canvas and zipper. She crouched, pulled it out. His old backpack. Still heavy. She unzipped it and found a half-empty water bottle, a book of poetry, and a crumpled envelope. The writing on the front stopped her cold. Private, Blake only. She hesitated. Then she unfolded it. Inside was a printout, an official document, crisp white against the dim yellow light of his desk lamp. Her eyes scanned the heading. Transfer of property. 418 Maple Glen Drive, her address. The transferee's name, Gary Hunt. The signature line, Blake Monroe, was blank. Her pulse thundered. She flipped through the remaining pages. Escrow details, notarization fields. All prepared but incomplete. Someone had gotten close. Very close. The floor creaked outside the door. Valerie froze, the papers clutched to her chest. The sound came again. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the hall carpet. She killed the lamp. A soft knock followed, gentle but offbeat. Then Gary's voice, calm as ever. You up here, Val? She didn't answer. Didn't mean to upset you earlier, he continued, tone syrupy smooth. You know how you get when you start worrying. Let's not dig through old rooms, okay? The handle twitched. Once. Then twice. Valerie moved fast. She stuffed the papers back into the envelope, shoved it into her coat, and crouched beside the bed. The door opened halfway. Gary's shoes appeared in the sliver of light. A pause, then retreating steps. When the hallway went quiet again, she waited a long beat before standing. Her pulse refused to calm. She looked once more around. Blake's room, the ordinary chaos of a life, interrupted and whispered, You were scared, weren't you? She tucked the envelope deeper into her pocket and moved toward the stairs, but something stopped her at the doorway. On the back of the door, thumbtacked between old photos and concert tickets, was a single torn note. Just 3 words in Blake's hurried scrawl, Don't trust him. Her breath caught. From downstairs, the sound of glass breaking. The sound of breaking glass jolted Valerie into motion. She hurried down the stairs, heart hammering. The lights on the first floor glared too bright, too staged. Every bulb glowing as though the house wanted to look harmless. Gary was at the counter again, towel in hand, sweeping up what looked like the shattered remains of a wine glass. He looked up, startled, or pretending to be. Damn thing slipped, he said with a sheepish grin. You okay up there? Valerie stayed at the bottom of the stairs, one hand gripping the banister. You scared me. Sorry about that, he said, voice smooth as butter. Was just pouring us a glass. Figured after all this tension, you could use something to take the edge off. He nodded toward the counter, where 2 half-filled glasses of red sat side by side. She didn't move. I don't want wine, Gary. Come on, Val, it's Thanksgiving. Let's not keep fighting. The smile didn't reach his eyes, and she could see his knuckles were white around the towel. Her own reflection in the window caught her eye. Tired, wary, older than she wanted to feel. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Why was Blake about to sign over my house? Gary's eyebrows flicked up, just a fraction. What? Don't play dumb with me, I found the papers in his room. For the first time that night, the easy confidence slipped. He straightened, setting the towel down carefully, buying time. That was just an idea Cliff and I tossed around a while ago, he said finally. family assets and all that. You know how messy these things get when what? When something happens. The way he said it, calm, rehearsed, made her blood go cold. Valerie took another step toward him. So you decided to plan for something happening to me? Gary exhaled, as if she were being unreasonable. Don't twist it. We were trying to protect everyone's interests. You're not getting any younger, Val. It's practical. Practical, she repeated, tasting the word like poison. That's what you call pressuring my son into signing my house away? He smiled again. Too quick. Too familiar. You've always assumed the worst of me. She stared at him, and for a moment the years peeled back. Every argument, every smirk, every half-truth. She remembered how good he was at sounding reasonable while her instincts screamed otherwise. I want to know where Blake is, she said. Now. Gary spread his hands. I told you. He left. No. You told me what you wanted me to believe. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're letting your imagination run wild again. He'll come back when he's ready. Miriam's heels clicked across the tile before Valerie could answer. She appeared in the doorway, arms folded, a thin smile plastered on. What's going on here? Just a misunderstanding, Gary said. Valerie turned to her. Did you know about the property transfer? Miriam blinked, her expression smoothing into something unreadable. I know you're making a mess of Thanksgiving, she said evenly. Blake's a grown man, Valerie. He's not your little boy anymore. If he wanted to give Gary a hand with some paperwork, that's his business. Valerie felt her stomach twist. His business? He's missing Miriam. Miriam's face didn't change. Maybe because you keep suffocating him. The words landed like a slap. Valerie took a slow step backward, her throat tight. Gary started to speak again, but she lifted her hand to stop him. I'm done talking, she said softly. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Valerie turned and walked to the front door. Gary's voice followed her, low and deliberate. Don't do anything stupid, Val. She stopped, hand on the knob. You already did. Outside, the air hit her lungs like glass, cold, clean, mercifully quiet. She walked down the driveway, past the dark shape of the studio apartment, past the flickering street lamp at the cul-de-sac's end. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket, an automated message from her credit monitoring service. Recent inquiry detected on property title. 418 Maple Glen Drive. She stared at the screen, her breath fogging in the air. The notification timestamp. 40 minutes ago. Valerie looked back toward the house. Through the window, Gary and Miriam stood close together, silhouettes overlapping. His hand moved to her shoulder. Her head tilted toward him in a way that wasn't comfort. It was strategy. The pie she'd brought still sat untouched on the counter behind them. Valerie turned away, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. All right, she whispered to herself. You want to play games with my home? Then you can watch what happens when I start fighting back. The wind carried her voice down the empty street, sharp and certain. The next morning broke gray and windless over Columbus, the kind of sky that pressed low and heavy. Valerie parked outside the brick office building with the brass plaque that read, Clifford Wagner, Attorney at Law. She sat in the car for a full minute, hands gripping the steering wheel, pulse steadying. The envelope with the unsigned deed lay on the passenger seat beside her. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gary's silhouette in the window, Miriam's hand on his arm, the empty chair at the table. Inside, the office smelled like leather and lemon polish. Cliff Wagner looked up from behind his desk as she entered, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. He was in his late 60s now, silver hair pulled back neatly, the same gravelly voice that had walked her through her divorce 15 years ago. Val? He stood, concern softening his eyes. You look like hell. Feel worse, she said, managing a weak smile as she sat down. I need you to look at something. He took the envelope and unfolded the pages carefully, scanning the first few lines. His expression shifted from curiosity to a frown. Transfer of property. This your house? She nodded. I found it in Blake's room. His name on the signature line. Gary's name on the buyer's. Cliff turned to his computer and began typing, his fingers surprisingly fast for his age. You think Gary forged anything? I think he tried to, she said. Blake never signed this, but he might have been pressured to. Cliff's brow furrowed deeper. He clicked through several screens, muttering to himself. Give me a second. If this thing was prepped through legitimate channels, there'll be a digital trail. Escrow filings, title movement, something. Valerie's foot tapped uncontrollably under the desk. The soft hum of the computer fan was the only sound in the room. Then Cliff's tone changed. Low. Careful. Well, look at that. Valerie leaned forward. What? He turned the monitor slightly toward her. There's a pending escrow account. Created 3 weeks ago. Title identifier matches your property address. Her breath caught. By who? He squinted. Filed by Gary Hunt. Listed owner of record, Valerie Monroe. Proposed transferee, Blake Monroe. He paused, eyes narrowing. But there's a problem. What problem? Verification. Cliff clicked a few more times. The account's incomplete. No signature from Blake, no verification from any notary. But all supporting docs were preloaded. Deed transfer, release forms, bank instructions, all unsigned but ready to move the moment authorization hit. Valerie's hands went cold. So he was setting it up behind my back? Cliff sat back, steepling his fingers. He was setting you up, period. This smells like coercion or straight-up fraud. The word fraud hung in the air, heavy and real. Valerie's throat felt tight. If he tried to move my property, he couldn't finish without Blake, Cliff interrupted. But if Blake disappears, that complicates everything. Valerie blinked. Complicates how? Ownership gets muddy, he said, his voice gentler now. If your son's missing and listed on an open escrow, Gary can petition that the property's in limbo. That gives him a legal foothold, thin, but possible. She gripped the arm of the chair. You're telling me that if my son stays missing long enough, Gary can take my house? Cliff nodded reluctantly. In theory, it wouldn't hold up forever, but he could make life hell until the court sorted it out. And Gary's the kind of man who thrives on chaos. Valerie looked down at her shaking hands. So what do I do? First, we secure your title, Cliff said. I'll file a protection notice, freeze the deed, block any movement until we clear this. But he stopped typing. His gaze shifted to her, sharp now. You said Blake didn't sign this. Are you absolutely sure? Her voice wavered. He wouldn't have. Not willingly. Cliff nodded slowly. Then we have 2 possibilities. 1, he was forced. 2, he hesitated. He went along with it. Valerie's stomach turned. You think he'd do that to me? I think we have to be prepared for either outcome, Cliff said. He pulled a legal pad closer, jotting notes. If Blake's disappearance is voluntary, that escrow can't be classified as fraudulent. If it's not, he met her eyes again. Then it's a crime. The words landed like a blow. Valerie leaned back, the office ceiling spinning faintly above her. And if it is a crime? She asked quietly. Cliff's voice softened. Then we'll find proof, and Gary Hunt will answer for it. A gust of wind rattled the window behind them, and for a moment the faint hum of traffic filled the silence. Valerie exhaled shakily, pressing a palm to her chest. He's not just trying to steal my home, she murmured. He's erasing me. piece by piece. Cliff closed the file folder carefully. Then we start making it impossible for him to finish the job. As Valerie stood to leave, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. An unknown number flashed across the screen. No name, no location. Just one message. You shouldn't have gone to the lawyer. The text disappeared before she could screenshot it. Valerie sat frozen in her car outside Cliff's office, the phone screen still glowing in her hand. The message had vanished, but its echo crawled beneath her skin. You shouldn't have gone to the lawyer. No name, no number. Just that warning. Then nothing. She took a shaky breath, started the engine, and pulled out onto the street. The clouds had thickened, dimming the day into a premature dusk. Every stoplight felt too long, every passing car suspicious in her mirrors. By the time she reached the edge of town, the fear had hardened into something else. Resolve. If Gary thought intimidation would scare her off, he didn't remember who she used to be before he took everything soft from her. She turned onto Main Street and parked near the diner where Blake had worked weekends in college. The front windows steamed from inside, casting a buttery glow onto the sidewalk. She carried a stack of freshly printed flyers, Blake's photo, recent, smiling but tired looking. Across the top, missing, please contact if seen. Inside, the scent of fried onions and burnt coffee hit her. The waitress behind the counter, an older woman with graying curls, looked up and recognized her instantly. Valerie, haven't seen you in ages. Valerie managed a polite smile. You remember my son, Blake? Sure do. Quiet kid, polite. Used to sit right over there with his sketchbook. The woman's face softened. He okay? I'm not sure, Valerie admitted, laying one of the flyers on the counter. I'm looking for him. The woman frowned, glancing over the paper. He was in here maybe 2 weeks back? Didn't look himself. Gaunt. Like he hadn't slept. Valerie's pulse quickened. Did he say where he was going? Just that things were getting ugly at home, the woman said softly. I asked if he wanted me to call anyone. He shook his head and left before finishing his coffee. Valerie nodded, her throat tight. Thank you. That helps. She posted a flyer on the diner's corkboard, then drove to the library. The parking lot was nearly empty. Through the glass doors she could see the young clerk at the desk, a girl with pink streaks in her hair flipping through a graphic novel. Excuse me, Valerie said, holding out a flyer. Have you seen him? Blake Monroe? The clerk tilted her head. Maybe. He was here not long ago. Used the computer lab a few times. Always paid in cash for prints. Real quiet guy. Do you know what he was printing? Some kind of form, I think, the clerk said. Looked like real estate stuff. He got a call, packed up fast, and left. Didn't come back. Valerie's stomach twisted. Do you remember anything about the call? The clerk frowned, thinking. He said, I told you I'd sign it when I see the papers myself. That's it. The words hit Valerie like a slap. She thanked the clerk and stepped back into the biting cold, blinking against a sudden rush of wind that cut through her coat. As she stood there, headlights flashed across the parking lot. A dark SUV idled by the curb, engine humming. The driver's silhouette was barely visible behind tinted glass. Valerie's breath caught. Then the SUV rolled forward slowly, too slowly, before turning the corner and disappearing down the street. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She opened it with numb fingers. Stop looking. She stared at the words until they blurred. A knock on her window startled her so hard she gasped. She turned, then exhaled when she saw her daughter, Tasha, outside in her office coat, face drawn with concern. Valerie unlocked the door. You scared me half to death. Tasha slid into the passenger seat. You scared me, Mom. Cliff called. Said you left his office looking pale. She glanced at the flyers in Valerie's lap, then at her mother's face. "You're really doing this, huh?" "I have to." Tasha's voice softened. "I should have been checking in. I knew Blake was drifting, but I thought he just needed space." Valerie swallowed hard. "We all thought that." They drove together for the next hour. Gas station, park bench, strip mall, taping flyers to lampposts and bulletin boards. The world outside felt unreal, muted by the encroaching dark. At the last stop, a barista at a corner coffee shop recognized Blake's photo. "Yeah," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "He was here maybe 2 weeks ago. Looked rough. Kept checking his phone like he was waiting for a call. Told me something about his stepdad pushing papers on him." Valerie forced herself to sound calm. "Did he say where he was headed?" The barista shook his head. "Just said he was done being followed." Her heart stuttered. "Followed?" The kid shrugged. "That's what he said." Then he tossed his coffee, left a 20 on the counter, and walked out. Valerie jotted everything in her small notebook, her handwriting shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. Back in the car, she closed the notebook and sat in silence. Tasha watched her, worry etched deep in her brow. "What now?" Tasha asked quietly. Valerie stared through the windshield, the reflection of her phone screen glowing faintly on the glass. "Now," she said, "I start keeping track of who's following me." Her phone buzzed again. A new text. No words. Just a photo. Blake's studio apartment. The door cracked open. Lights on inside. The photo wouldn't leave her mind. That half-open door. The faint strip of light cutting across Blake's floor. She'd stared at it until dawn, unable to tell if it was a warning or a breadcrumb. By morning, Valerie drove straight to the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. The building was all dull brick and concrete, the kind of place where Hope went to file paperwork. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over gray tile floors. At the front desk, a deputy glanced up. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I need to speak with Deputy Reyes," Valerie said, clutching her folder to her chest. "It's about a missing person. My son." The deputy's tone softened. "I'll let her know you're here." 10 minutes later, Reyes appeared, a compact woman in her mid-40s, dark hair pulled tight, badge catching the light when she moved. Her expression was calm but alert, the kind of steady that put people at ease or on edge, depending on which side of the truth they stood. "Mrs. Monroe," she said, offering her hand. "Come with me." They sat in a small interview room that smelled faintly of coffee and copier ink. Reyes clicked on a recorder. "All right, start from the beginning." Valerie opened the folder. Inside were the unsigned deed, Blake's journal page, and a printed copy of the photo she'd received at midnight. Her voice trembled at first, but once she started, the words poured out. Gary's evasions, the false text message, the escrow file Cliff had uncovered, and the strange warnings from an unknown number. When she finished, Reyes leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You're saying your ex-husband forged documents to take possession of your home, and your son vanished in the middle of it?" "Yes. And now someone's trying to scare me off from finding him." Reyes studied her a long moment. Then quietly, "Do you have any reason to think Gary would harm your son?" Valerie hesitated. "He's manipulative, charming, until he's cornered. And Blake was always easy to guilt. If Gary convinced him this was somehow for the family, he might have agreed. Until he realized what was happening." Reyes nodded, jotting notes. "We'll open a missing person file. He's an adult, but given the circumstances, we'll treat this seriously." Relief mixed with dread. "Thank you," Valerie whispered. "I'll need to talk to Gary and his wife," Reyes added. "See what stories they tell." "Be careful," Valerie said. "He's good at pretending concern." Reyes gave a small, knowing smile. "So am I." By late afternoon, Valerie was back in her car, parked across from Gary's house. Her nerves buzzed with restless energy. She watched as an unmarked cruiser pulled into the driveway. Two officers stepped out. Moments later, Gary and Miriam appeared at the door. Even from across the street, Valerie could read the performance in Gary's gestures. Hands spread wide, eyebrows lifted in disbelief. Miriam stood behind him, face pale, shaking her head like a woman burdened by someone else's chaos. A few minutes later, one of the officers left with a clipboard. The cruiser rolled away. Gary remained in the doorway for a moment, staring down the street as if he already knew she was watching. Valerie ducked slightly in her seat, pulse thudding. Her phone buzzed. A text from Reyes. Interview done. He claims Blake was depressed and left voluntarily. No signs of forced disappearance. Valerie clenched her jaw, typing back fast. He's lying. I have proof. She drove straight to the sheriff's office again, storming past the front desk this time. Reyes met her halfway down the hall. He said Blake left after an argument, Reyes explained calmly. Told us you're making things worse by digging up old family fights. Valerie set her folder on the table hard enough to make the papers scatter. These aren't fights, she snapped. They're receipts. Reyes flipped through the unsigned deed first, her eyes sharpened. This is the document you mentioned? Yes. And this? Valerie pulled out the photocopied journal page. Blake wrote that Gary and Miriam were pressuring him to sign it. He was scared. Reyes studied the page. This is strong. It doesn't prove harm, but it shows intent. It's enough for us to dig deeper. Valerie nodded, her throat tight. Then dig. Reyes gave a small, approving nod. I will. She slid the papers into a folder marked Evidence Intake. You did the right thing coming here. Valerie leaned back in the chair, exhaustion catching up to her. I just want my son back. Reyes looked up from her notes. If he's out there, we'll find him. And if someone's keeping him from you, we'll find them faster. As Valerie left the station, dusk had already fallen. The parking lot glowed under orange sodium lights. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She hesitated before opening it. A video file. No message this time. She pressed play. The camera was shaky. Handheld. A dark room. A single figure, male, slumped against a wall. Only, for a second did the light catch his face. Blake. Alive. Then the feed cut to static. Valerie's knees nearly gave out. She gripped the car door to steady herself. And then her phone buzzed one more time, the final text appearing like a whisper. You wanted proof. Now stop. Valerie didn't remember driving home. The road blurred past in streaks of sodium light and rain. Her mind replayed the few frozen frames of that video. Blake's face, pale and terrified in some dark place she didn't recognize. The message still pulsed in her head. You wanted proof. Now stop. By the time she reached her driveway, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn off the ignition. She sat there in the dark until her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Cliff. Val, he said the moment she answered. You need to get over here. Now. Cliff's office was empty except for the glow of his desk lamp. He looked tired, his shirt untucked, the tie gone. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat beside his laptop. I filed the injunction, he said before she could sit down. It's done. The county recorder just confirmed. Any pending transaction tied to your property or Blake's name is frozen until further notice. Valerie exhaled shakily. What does that mean? It means Gary can't move money, can't modify the escrow, can't file ownership claims. It's locked down. Her relief was brief. Then we're safe? Cliff gave her a look that was more weary than confident. We bought time, but that's all. He turned his screen toward her. I checked the account myself before the lock went through. Gary tried accessing it twice this morning. He's not giving up. Valerie stared at the screen. 2 failed login attempts. Timestamps just hours apart. He knows we're closing in. Cliff nodded. And he's going to panic. As if on cue, her phone lit up on the desk. Miriam Hunt. Valerie hesitated before answering. Miriam's voice was sharp, brittle, with anger. "What the hell did you do? Gary's accounts are frozen. His escrow access is blocked. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you've started?" Valerie leaned back in her chair, tone level. "No trouble at all. Just protecting my home." "You're trying to bankrupt us." "No," Valerie said quietly. "I'm trying to find my son." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Then Miriam's voice lowered to a hiss. "You're making a mistake, Valerie. Gary's not your enemy." Valerie almost laughed. "Then why is he treating my disappearance like a business opportunity?" The line went dead. Cliff watched her set the phone down. "They're rattled," he said. "Good." Valerie rubbed her eyes, exhaustion clawing at her. "If Blake's alive somewhere, we need proof of where. That video, they wanted me to see it. They wanted control." Cliff frowned. "Did you save it?" "It deleted itself." "Then whoever sent it doesn't want evidence on your end." Before she could respond, a knock came at the door. Tasha stepped in, her coat wet from the drizzle outside, Blake's old laptop tucked under her arm. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "you left this in the garage after he moved out. I thought maybe there'd be something. Emails, photos, anything." Cliff cleared space on the desk while Tasha powered it on. The fan whirred weakly, the old machine struggling to wake up. Valerie stood beside her daughter, the screen's pale glow reflecting in both their faces. Tasha clicked through folders, artwork, music, old college essays. Then she paused. "There's a draft email," she said. "Last edited 2 weeks ago." Valerie's pulse quickened. "Open it." The subject line read, "If anything happens to me." The body was short, unfinished. "To whom it may concern." "If you're reading this, then Gary forced my hand." He said. It ended mid-sentence. Tasha covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Cliff's chair scraped back as he stood. "Print that. Right now." He leaned over, sending the draft to the office printer, the machine humming to life. When the paper slid out, he handled it like fragile glass, slipping it into a legal envelope. "This changes everything," he said. "A partial confession, written in Blake's own account. We can use this to strengthen both cases, the fraud and the missing person." Valerie stared at the screen, the blinking cursor after the last unfinished word. Her hands trembled. He was about to send it. Someone stopped him. Cliff met her eyes. "Then that someone still thinks they can stop you too." The printer clicked once more, a low mechanical sound echoing through the quiet office. And then Valerie's phone buzzed again. Another text. This one had no message, just an image attachment. It was the same video of Blake, but now there was sound. A faint voice behind the camera, unmistakably male. "Tell her to drop it." Blake's hoarse reply came seconds later, barely above a whisper. "Mom, don't." For the rest of the night, Valerie couldn't shut her eyes without hearing Blake's voice. "Mom, don't." The sound of it, raw, frightened, pleading, played on repeat until dawn broke gray over the cul-de-sac. By sunrise, she'd made her decision. If they wanted her to stop, that meant she was getting close. She sat in Cliff's office again by mid-morning, the blinds half drawn against the cold light. Deputy Reyes was there this time, leaning over a manila folder of evidence. "We traced the last known transaction under Blake's name," Reyes said. "One-way bus ticket to Detroit, purchased online a day after he disappeared." Valerie frowned. "Detroit? He doesn't know anyone there." "That's what makes it strange," Reyes replied. "We pulled transit station footage." She slid a printed still across the desk. A grainy image. A tall man boarding a greyhound, hood up, head down, same build, same jacket. But when Valerie leaned closer, her stomach turned. That's not my son. Cliff adjusted his glasses, studying the photo. You're sure? I changed that jacket's zipper last year. His was silver. This one's black. Reyes nodded slowly. Then this was staged. Valerie sat back, dizzy. Someone wanted it to look like he left on his own. Exactly, Reyes said. And whoever it was had access to his ID and bank card. Cliff opened another document. Gary's financials show a wire transfer that same day. $10,000 sent to a new account under the name Darren Mills. I had our analyst check. It's a ghost identity. The address belongs to a closed P.O. box. Valerie's pulse quickened. So Gary paid someone to disappear for Blake. Reyes's expression hardened. Looks that way. The transfer cleared the morning before that bus ticket was used. The room felt smaller, air thicker. Valerie pressed her fingertips against her temple. He's buying distance. A fake trail. Cliff's phone chimed. He glanced down, lips tightening. And it gets better. Miriam just closed their joint bank account. Entire balance moved to a personal account in her name. Running scared. Reyes muttered. She knows the wall's closing in. Valerie stood abruptly, pacing the room. We have to find where the money went. Whoever Gary paid, maybe they know where Blake really is. Reyes closed the folder. I'll request a warrant to trace the wire. But it'll take time. You need to keep your phone on and stay alert. Whoever's sending those videos, don't answer if they call. Valerie nodded, though her hands were still trembling. I won't stop until he's safe. Cliff rose and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. We're getting closer, Val. This staged Detroit trip. It's their mistake. Every fake lead leaves a footprint. She managed a faint smile. Then let's make them trip over it. That evening, Valerie sat in her car outside the empty diner again, headlights off. The parking lot was slick with freezing rain, neon reflections bending across the puddles. She clutched her phone, scrolling through photos of Blake, searching for details she might have missed. A scar, a ring, something that could prove that video was real. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't open it. Then she did. One line of text. I'm okay. Don't trust him. I'm hiding. Valerie's breath caught. She read it twice, 3 times, heart pounding. Her first instinct was to call Reyes, but she hesitated. The pronoun him. It could only mean Gary. But what if the message wasn't from Blake at all? She stared at the text again. The contact photo field was empty, but the number had a faint echo of familiarity. The same first 3 digits as Blake's old prepaid phone. Her fingers hovered over reply. Then another message appeared. They'll see this. Don't text back. Just wait. The screen went dark. Outside, a car rolled slowly past the diner, taillights fading into the wet street. Valerie's reflection stared back from the window, eyes wide, pulse visible in her throat. Somewhere out there, her son was alive, and he was warning her that the man she feared most wasn't the only one watching. Valerie sat motionless in the driver's seat, the diner lights reflecting off the wet windshield. The words, I'm okay. Don't trust him. I'm hiding still glowed on her phone like a heartbeat. Her fingers hovered above the screen. She shouldn't reply. He'd said not to, but she couldn't help herself. If it's really you, send me proof. Something only we'd know. She hit send and waited, her pulse drumming in her ears. Outside, the wind whispered through the power lines. A minute passed, then 2. The reply came as an image file. She opened it. A small room, dim, bare walls, an unmade cot. On the nightstand, a chipped mug with faded lettering, World's Okayest Mom, the one she'd given him years ago, half as a joke, half as an apology. Valerie's breath caught. She zoomed in. Same crack along the handle. Same coffee stain near the rim. It was him. It had to be. Her phone buzzed again. I'm safe for now. 2 towns over. I can't say where. He told them he'd have me committed if I didn't sign. Said Mom was better off if I cooperated. Valerie's throat tightened. Committed. She could hear Gary's voice in her head, calm and cruel. He's unstable, Val. He needs help. She texted back quickly, hands shaking. Blake, listen to me. Don't move. Don't trust anyone. I'm bringing help. Before she could send another message, her phone rang, Cliff's name flashing. She answered immediately. Val, Reyes and I are at the station. You need to come in. I can't, she said, voice trembling. He just texted. It's him. He's alive. There was silence on the line, then Reyes's steady voice in the background. Can you prove it's your son? I can. Valerie sent the photo before they could ask. That mug. It's his. Nobody else would know. Stay where you are, Reyes said. We're setting up a secure line. Don't respond unless we tell you. 20 minutes later, Valerie sat in Cliff's office again, her phone wired into a speaker connected to a secure channel. Reyes stood beside her, pen in hand, recording everything. Cliff adjusted the settings on his laptop. All right, if he calls or texts again, it'll route through this trace system. We can verify his location, maybe even triangulate the tower. Valerie's phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. An incoming call. Unknown number. Reyes gave a quick nod. Answer it. Valerie pressed the green icon. Blake? A breath on the other end, then his voice. Hoarse, cautious, real. Mom. The sound broke something inside her. Oh, honey, where are you? Are you hurt? I can't. Say, he whispered. They're still watching. I can't stay long. Who's watching you? Reyes mouthed silently, motioning for Valerie to keep him talking. Gary? Valerie asked softly. Blake hesitated. He said if I didn't sign, he'd have me committed. Said he already had the paperwork. He called someone. Said Mom would lose everything if I didn't cooperate. Valerie's eyes filled. He threatened you with a mental institution? I thought he'd calm down, but then some guys came to the house. Said they were helping with the transfer. They took my phone, my wallet. I ran. Been hiding since. Cliff leaned forward, voice low. Blake, this is Cliff. Do you know where you are now? Any landmarks? I think it's a motel, Blake said faintly. By a gas station. Red sign. But I can't stay. They keep calling the front desk asking if I've checked out. Reyes scribbled notes, whispering to another officer outside the door. Valerie pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. You did the right thing running, sweetheart. You're safe now. We'll get you. No, Blake said, his voice cracking. You can't come here. If they know you're looking, they'll find me first. We have law enforcement involved now, Reyes said gently. You did the right thing contacting your mom. We can protect you, but we need your location. I'll send it, Blake said quietly. But you have to promise. Don't tell him. He'll twist it. He always does. Valerie swallowed hard. I promise. I've got you, Blake. There was a pause, one long exhale through static. Mom, he whispered. If anything happens. The line went dead. Reyes snapped her head toward Cliff. Did we get it? He scanned the tracing program. Pinged near I-71. Exit 128. That's Newark. 2 towns over. Valerie's breath caught. He is close. Reyes holstered her radio. We'll send a team there now, but Val, you stay here. Do not go on your own. Valerie nodded, though her eyes drifted toward the door. She already knew she wouldn't stay put. Her phone buzzed once more. One new text. If you come, alone. The courthouse smelled faintly of old varnish and nerves. Fluorescent light washed across marble floors as Valerie followed Cliff down the hallway, her heels clicking with each determined step. Outside, gray clouds pressed low over Columbus, mirroring the weight in her chest. It had been 3 days since the call from Blake, 3 days of police intervention, statements, and sleepless nights. Now, Cliff had done what Gary never thought she'd dare: file formal fraud and coercion charges. At the courtroom doors, Cliff paused, straightening his tie. "Remember," he said quietly, "we stay calm. They're going to play victim. Let them." Valerie nodded. "I've been letting them for years. Not anymore." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Gary sat at the defense table, sharp suit, perfect posture, the picture of dignity. Miriam beside him looked brittle, her pearl necklace tight around her throat. Their attorney, a smooth-faced man in his 40s, leaned over to whisper something, prompting Gary's smirk to return. Cliff guided Valerie to her seat. Across from them, Deputy Reyes stood near the gallery, silent but watchful. "All rise," the bailiff called. The judge entered, a tall woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "We are here regarding case Tbakrung 4512, Monroe versus Hunt, allegations of property fraud, financial coercion, and emotional abuse." Gary's lawyer rose first, voice measured. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding between families. My client merely attempted to consolidate assets for financial efficiency. There was no malice. Only miscommunication." Valerie's hands clenched under the table. Miscommunication. That's what they called it when you tried to erase someone's life on paper. Cliff stood. "Your Honor, what my client calls miscommunication, we call coercion." Gary Hunt attempted to manipulate a missing man, his stepson, into signing over his mother's home. When that failed, he faked the son's disappearance and initiated an escrow transfer under false pretenses. The defense attorney chuckled lightly. "That's quite a story, Mr. Wagner. But the young man in question is an adult. There's no evidence he was held against his will." "Then let's ask him." Cliff gestured toward the monitor set up beside the judge's bench. The screen flickered to life. Grainy video feed from the sheriff's secure office. Blake appeared on the screen, pale but steady. He sat in front of a plain wall, hands clasped tightly together. The courtroom stilled. Even Gary's smirk faltered. Cliff approached the screen. "Blake, can you tell the court in your own words what happened?" Blake looked down, then up again. "Gary cornered me in the kitchen. Said Mom was too emotional to handle the house. Said it'd be easier if I just signed everything over so he could manage things. When I refused, he grabbed my arm and told me he'd have me committed if I didn't cooperate." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Valerie's breath hitched. Blake continued, voice trembling but firm. "He had papers ready. The deed. The escrow transfer. He said if I didn't sign, he'd tell everyone I was unstable, that Mom was losing it too. So I ran. I've been hiding ever since." Cliff's tone softened. "Blake, has anyone contacted you since that day?" "Yes," Blake said. "He did. Or someone working for him. They sent messages. Told me to keep quiet." Gary's attorney leapt up. "Objection. There's no proof those messages came from my client." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, counselor. We'll get to proof." Valerie stared at Gary. For the first time, he wouldn't look at her. Reyes stepped forward from the gallery. "Your Honor," she said, holding up a folder. The sheriff's department recovered the messages from Blake's phone. They traced directly to a number registered under a subsidiary of Mr. Hunt's contracting business. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Gary's lawyer sputtered. This is circumstantial." The judge's voice was ice. "No, counselor, this is evidence." Miriam shifted beside Gary, her hand trembling as she reached for his arm. He jerked it away. She stared at him, something breaking behind her eyes. Without a word, she stood, gathered her purse, and walked out. Valerie watched her go, feeling no triumph, only a hollow ache. Blake's voice came through the speakers again, quieter this time. I don't want revenge. I just want it to stop. I want my mom to be safe. The judge nodded slowly. You will be. Effective immediately, this court grants a restraining order against Gary Hunt. All assets tied to the fraudulent escrow will remain frozen pending further investigation. Full protective rights for Blake Monroe are hereby issued. The gavel struck. Gary slumped back in his chair, disbelief twisting his face. Cliff exhaled slowly, relief flickering across his features. Valerie's hands trembled in her lap, the weight of it all finally catching up. Reyes approached her quietly. You did it, Val. Valerie shook her head. No, we're not done yet. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down and froze. A text from an unknown number. He's not the only one who wanted that deed. The courthouse victory had felt hollow, an echo of justice, not the real thing. For the first time in weeks, the air outside was warm again, but Valerie still couldn't shake the cold in her bones. That text haunted her. He's not the only one who wanted that deed. By morning, Cliff was already moving. He'd filed additional motions, claims for emotional distress, housing fraud, attempted deed theft. When Valerie walked into his office, he had papers spread across his desk like a battlefield map. This isn't just about the house anymore, he told her. It's about accountability. We're going to make sure Gary can't crawl out of this with a smile and a settlement. Valerie nodded, though exhaustion hung behind her eyes. I don't want money. I want distance. I want peace. Cliff gave a tired smile. Those come after the paperwork. The sound of her phone vibrating broke their focus. It was Tasha. Mom? Her daughter's voice was shaky but determined. I've been thinking. I want to testify. About what he did. The calls. The pressure. I should have said something sooner. Valerie closed her eyes, emotion catching in her throat. You don't have to, honey. I do, Tasha said. He made all of us small. It's time someone made him look small. That afternoon, Valerie returned to her house for the first time since Thanksgiving. The driveway was littered with wind-blown leaves, the porch railing still chipped where Blake had leaned too hard on it that summer. She paused at the threshold, breathing in the familiar mix of paint, dust, and something gentler. Memory. Inside, she began her quiet repairs. A new coat of paint for the living room walls, fresh curtains in the kitchen. She scrubbed the floor until it gleamed, her movements steady, rhythmic, her own reclamation ritual. The mail piled on the counter included the official notice, all financial activity tied to Gary Hunt, frozen pending review. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. For years he'd dictated how her life moved, when she could breathe, when she could speak, when she could stop defending herself. Not anymore. The crunch of gravel outside startled her. She looked through the window and froze. Blake stood at the end of the walkway, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, hair longer, face thinner. He looked older, but his eyes, those same soft brown eyes, were still her boy's. She stepped out onto the porch, her voice breaking. Blake. He hesitated, as if afraid she might vanish if he came closer. Then he dropped the bag and crossed the distance in 3 strides. Valerie wrapped her arms around him, holding him so tightly it hurt. For a long time, neither of them said anything. When they finally pulled apart, she searched his face. You're really here? I am. He gave a shaky smile. Reyes picked me up after the hearing. She said it was safe now. Is it? Valerie asked quietly. He nodded, though the shadows under his eyes told another story. Gary's done. Cliff said his accounts are locked. He can't touch anything. Valerie exhaled, relief and grief colliding in her chest. I should have protected you sooner. You did, Blake said softly. You never stopped. He glanced toward the house. It looks different. Fresh start, she said. For both of us. He smiled faintly. You know, I kept thinking, if I ever got back here, I'd tell you something. What's that? Blake looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. You were right about him. About all of it. Tears welled again, but this time they felt clean, like something being washed away. They stood there for a while, mother and son, while the afternoon light softened the edges of everything broken. Inside, Valerie set water to boil for tea, and for the first time in months, the house felt like home again. Later that evening, Cliff called. Val, just got word from the county financial office. Gary's accounts are fully frozen. Not a penny moves until trial. It's over. Valerie smiled, leaning against the window. Then maybe I can finally breathe. Just keep your phone on, Cliff said. If there's one thing I've learned in 40 years of law, it's that men like him never accept defeat quietly. After they hung up, Valerie watched the streetlights flicker on. The wind rustled the maple tree out front, its branches scratching faintly against the window pane. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. A new text. Unknown number. You think you won? Check your mail tomorrow. She stared at the message until the screen went dark. Its reflection, hovering faintly in the glass beside her own. The mail arrived late the next day. 3 envelopes, a utility bill, and a thick, unmarked manila folder. Valerie's stomach twisted the moment she saw it sitting apart from the rest, as if even the postal worker hadn't wanted to touch it. Blake was still asleep upstairs. She stood at the counter, staring at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her own name in neat, typed letters, and a photocopy of the deed to 418 Maple Glen Drive. Scrawled in pen across the bottom, one signature away from being mine. No return address, no fingerprints, just the message. By noon, Cliff and Deputy Reyes were both at her kitchen table, their faces tight. It's him, Reyes said, or someone acting for him. We've got the text, now this. He's escalating. Cliff's jaw tightened. He wants attention, let's give him some. 2 days later, the courthouse lawn was crowded. Local reporters had caught wind of the case, the family fraud that turned criminal. Valerie hadn't wanted a scene, but Cliff insisted. He needs to know you're not afraid to face him in daylight. Gary arrived with a new attorney, one with sharper suits and colder eyes. He wore the same smug confidence, the kind that had always made her want to scream. Miriam wasn't with him this time. She'd filed for divorce quietly, the gossip mill said. Valerie stood beside Cliff, dressed in navy and calm. She looked like a woman rebuilt, not broken. The reporters gathered as Cliff spoke first, summarizing the day's hearing, a procedural update, a formality, but the real moment came after. Valerie stepped forward, a small envelope in her hands. Before we go, I have an announcement, she said, her voice steady despite the thudding in her chest. I've made a decision regarding the house. Gary's smirk spread instantly. Finally, he said under his breath. Valerie glanced at Cliff, who nodded once. Then she turned back to Gary. I've decided to name you as the recipient of the deed. The crowd murmured. Cameras clicked. Gary's eyebrows shot up, surprise flickering into triumph. I knew you'd come around, he said smoothly, loud enough for the microphones. Took you long enough to see reason. Cliff handed him a large envelope, the kind used for official documents. You might want to open it, he said dryly. Gary slid a finger under the seal, tore it open, and pulled out the contents. Inside was a single framed document, the original deed to 418 Maple Glen Drive. Across it, in bold red letters, was a thick stamp, void. For a moment Gary didn't understand. His eyes darted across the page, confusion curdling into rage. What the hell is this? Valerie smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. You wanted the deed. Now you've got it. You can hold it. she said, stepping closer, her voice cutting through the murmuring crowd. But you'll never own it. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. Cliff stood beside her like an anchor while Gary's expression collapsed under the weight of humiliation. You think this is funny? He hissed. I think it's justice, Valerie said. Behind her, Blake stood on the courthouse steps, hands in his pockets, watching silently. His face was unreadable, equal parts pride and disbelief. Reyes approached quietly from the side, nodding toward Valerie. Nicely done. That should keep him quiet for a while. But Valerie wasn't finished. She reached into her briefcase and handed Cliff one last envelope. Thinner, legal grade, freshly signed. File this, she said. Cliff glanced at it, then looked up at her with surprise. Are you sure? She nodded. Completely. He turned to the press. For the record, he said clearly, my client has just filed for full and permanent revocation of Gary Hunt's inheritance rights stemming from their prior divorce settlement. Every clause, every claim, every cent he ever thought he could touch. Gone. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Gary's lawyer's face went pale. Gary took a half step forward, jaw tight. You can't. I already did, Valerie interrupted softly. He stared at her, the fight draining from his posture as realization set in. The man who had spent decades twisting her life into something smaller finally looked small himself. Valerie turned away, her heels clicking on the concrete as she walked back toward the steps. Blake moved aside to let her pass, but she stopped just long enough to meet his eyes. Come home, she said. He nodded. As they left the courthouse, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, scattering light across the marble steps. But Valerie's phone buzzed again, one quiet vibration against her palm. A new text. Unknown number. You voided the wrong document. The courthouse clerk's pen scratched steadily across the form, the sound like a metronome marking time as Valerie waited. Everything here look correct, Ms. Monroe? She looked down at the paperwork, rows of lines, dates, signatures, and the final box at the bottom where her old name waited like something resurrected. Valerie James, her maiden name, the one she'd set aside 25 years ago for Gary's. She took the pen, the weight of it grounding her. It looks perfect, she said, and signed in one clean motion. The clerk smiled. Congratulations. As of today, you are legally Valerie James again. For the first time in years, the words felt right in her mouth. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and asphalt. Cliff was waiting by the courthouse steps, holding a folder stamped with the county seal. Well, he said, Ms. James, it suits you. She smiled. Feels lighter already. He handed her the document. The court finalized everything. The property is now registered solely under your name, and Blake's financial guardianship transfer came through this morning. Your signature's the only one that counts. Valerie traced the embossed seal with her thumb. So it's finally done. Almost, Cliff said. There's still the matter of Gary's frozen assets. You're entitled to a portion once the review clears. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Good. I already know where part of it's going. A week later, Valerie stood outside the downtown office of the Midwest Missing Youth Foundation. She handed the donation check to the director, a woman with tired but kind eyes. For kids who don't have someone looking for them, Valerie said quietly. The woman took her hand. They do now. When Valerie walked back into the sunlight, something in her chest finally unknotted. That weekend, the house smelled like paint and lemon soap. Blake stood on the porch railing, balancing a brush precariously while Tasha laughed from below. You're getting more on yourself than the wood, she teased. Occupational hazard, he said, flicking a speck toward her. Valerie watched them from the doorway, her heart full. The three of them, paint splattered, laughing, exhausted, looked like a photograph she'd never managed to capture before now. The house glowed in the late afternoon light, its fresh white trim catching the sun. It didn't look haunted anymore. It looked lived in. Blake jumped down, wiping his hands on his jeans. "We're almost done." "Almost," Valerie said, smiling. "We still need to repaint the mailbox." Tasha leaned against the porch post, grinning. "What should we put on it? The Monroes? Or do we go back to—" "James," Valerie said softly. "It's James now." Both of them looked at her, surprised at first, then proud. Blake nodded slowly. "It suits you." That evening, Cliff showed up with a bottle of wine and paper cups. He kicked off his shoes at the door like he'd been doing it his whole life. "Thought we could celebrate the official end of your ex-husband's financial empire," he said, handing her a cup. "Feels strange," Valerie admitted, "to have it all quiet." "Quiet's earned," he said. He raised his cup. "To real family, the ones who stay when the paperwork burns." They clinked their cups together. The laughter was soft, genuine. For the first time in a long time, Valerie let herself breathe deeply. The air smelled like paint and warm bread. The porch light glowed. Blake and Tasha bickered good-naturedly over music in the background. She was home. Entirely. But then, as Cliff turned to set down the empty bottle, a quiet thud echoed outside, the sound of something landing softly on the porch. Valerie frowned and opened the door. A single manila envelope sat on the welcome mat. No stamp, no markings, just her new name typed neatly on the front, Valerie James. She bent to pick it up, her hand trembling slightly. Inside was a single photocopy. Another legal document. Her deed. Again. But this time, a new name had been typed beneath hers in the co-owner field. Darren Mills. The fake identity Gary had used for the wire transfer. And in pen, below it, one new message. "You changed your name, not your target." The leaves had turned again. Amber, russet, and gold, and the house on Maple Glen Drive looked nothing like the one Valerie had fled from a year ago. The trim gleamed, the garden bloomed with stubborn autumn mums, and a brass nameplate on the porch finally bore the truth: the James family. Inside, the table was set with mismatched china and fresh candles. The smell of roasted turkey drifted through the house, and laughter, unforced, warm, rose from the kitchen where Tasha was teasing Blake about his lumpy mashed potatoes. "Mom, you're letting him near the gravy again?" Tasha called. Valerie smiled from her place at the counter, arranging cranberry sauce on her grandmother's glass dish. "He's earned a second chance, even with gravy." Blake grinned, mock offended. "Hey, I survived worse than kitchen duty." "Barely," Tasha said, rolling her eyes. Their banter felt ordinary, beautifully ordinary. Earlier that morning, Valerie had met Cliff at the county office one last time. The paperwork was simple this time. No traps, no hidden signatures, no deceit. Just a trust transfer document, typed neatly in black ink. She'd signed first. Then she'd slid the pen across to Cliff. "Make it official." He nodded, watching her sign Valerie James, trustee. Under future co-owners, two names appeared: Blake James and Tasha James. When it was done, Cliff exhaled, closing the folder. "It's secure now. Irrevocable trust. No one, not Gary, not anyone hiding behind fake names, can touch it." Valerie smiled softly. "Good. Then this home will never belong to fear again." Now, as night settled over the quiet cul-de-sac, the three of them gathered around the dining table. The same table that had once carried tension thick enough to choke on now shimmered beneath candlelight and laughter. Blake raised his glass of cider. "You know, it feels weird sitting here again, like the ghosts moved out and took the silence with them." Valerie met his eyes, her own brimming. "Maybe they finally learned their place." He grinned and stood, holding his glass a little higher. To Mom, he said, to the one who never stopped looking. Not once. The room stilled. Even Tasha's teasing quieted as she clinked her glass against his. Valerie blinked back tears, smiling through them. To the ones worth finding. They drank. And for a long time, no one said another word. The crackle of the fireplace filled the room. Later, as the dishes soaked and the candles burned low, Valerie stepped out onto the porch alone. The night was cold, clear, and utterly still. The neighborhood lights glowed in soft halos down the street. Her phone buzzed once. A message. From Cliff. Settlement cleared. He's done. Valerie stared at the words for a long moment, letting them sink in. She looked up at the stars, her reflection faint in the window behind her, stronger, older, freer. From inside came the sound of her children's laughter, no longer brittle or cautious, but real. She whispered the final words to the dark, the air carrying them like an oath. He disappeared, my son. So I disappeared his future. And for the first time in years, the house on Maple Glen Drive was truly hers, safe, steady, and shining against the night.